So welcome everyone joining in. You're attending the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center Pests in Progress webinar. My name is Laura Isles. I'm one of the co-directors of the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. There are 4 regional integrated pest management centers, all supported by USDA, NEWA, Crop Protection and Pest Management Regional Coordination Program. And the North Central Pest Management Program, we have the mission to share IPM across the region, promote IPM research, extension, all those things. And we're very excited to be hosting today's webinar. If you have questions, there's a Q&A part at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you see that little Q&A. Feel free to post questions for our speakers in there. If you're just having trouble hearing or something like that, feel free to post that in the chat. The chat will be monitored by us hosts. So I'm excited today for our talk on saving money and pesticides for apple growers with new spray technology and warning systems. And I'm going to let you get started, Mark, and introduce our speakers and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm Mark Gleason. I'm a plant pathologist at Iowa State, and I'm the project director for this particular project that's been going on for about 3 years. So there's 3 presenters today. And so Liv, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, my name is Liv. I'm a graduate student working under Dr. Gleason. Happy to be here.
Melanie?
Hi, I'm Melanie Lewis-Ivey, and I'm at The Ohio State University, and I'm on the Worcester campus. And I am the fruit pathologist, the state fruit pathologist and fresh produce safety specialist.
Great. Okay, well, we'll get started here and cover these 2 related but somewhat differing subjects today, and we'll just get going on that. The first aspect that we wanted to cover is our work with this novel type of orchard sprayer called the intelligent sprayer. It's an outgrowth of the air blast sprayer, which has been around as long as I have, which is a long time, at least since the 1950s. This has been the standard for pesticide and other applications in the apple orchard. But you know, there's some issues with the air blast, and it has done a nice job for pest and disease control if we get our timing and our rates right. But and the technology is very familiar to most commercial apple growers. But the negatives is it is somewhat prone to spray drift, as anybody who's used them knows. And unfortunately, a fair amount of the spray misses the target. This intelligent sprayer is a direct development of research and engineering by Dr. Heping Ju, who's an engineer at the USDA spray lab in Worcester, Ohio. And he's been doing this work for more than a decade, and developing a prototype, and then has gotten it far enough that it is commercially available now. A company that's manufacturing it is called Smart Apply, incorporated in Indianapolis. Okay, so what's different about the intelligent sprayer? What makes it intelligent? Well, one thing is that it uses LiDAR, which may be a term familiar to you. It's a laser pulse that's released by the sprayer and then bounces off the tree. And the reason we're showing a bat here is that there's an analogy to the way a bat finds its food in the environment. It puts out these high frequency sound pulses, and they bounce off insects and other things to tell the bat where there's something to eat. Well, in the case of the intelligent sprayer, the purpose is a little different. The pulses go out, and they're not ultrasonic, they're laser, but they get reflected off the apple tree, and they essentially tell the sprayer, those reflections tell the sprayer where the tree is and how dense the canopy is. So the sprayer in real time develops this picture of the presence and location of the tree and the density of the tree. And this information goes very quickly to the nozzles and enables the nozzles to turn on and off and target the particular trees that are there If you're looking at it, it doesn't look a whole lot different than a standard air blast, except there's some add-ons here. In the cab, there's a tablet, user interface tablet computer that sits in the cab and enables you to make a lot of adjustments and take a lot of data on how much spray you're applying as well. And then there's the LiDAR sensing device, which is this unit that you see in the middle there, kind of poking up behind the cab. And the nozzles are different than what you see on a standard air blast. They're what's called pulse width modulation valves, and they can turn on and off very quickly, so they can respond to information from the LiDAR that tells it where the vegetation is in the row and how dense it is. So this is very much a sprayer that can see. There is an analogy to driverless cars that you may have heard of, or driverless trucks for that matter, where the LiDAR unit, same technology as the intelligent sprayer, sits on top of the vehicle, and laser reflections help the vehicle determine where it is in space and hopefully control it. Now we're going to switch now to hearing from Liv, talking about some of her findings in an orchard using the intelligent sprayer in Iowa. So Liv, it's all yours.
Thank you. So we had conducted a 3-year research study at the Iowa State Horticulture Research Station in Gilbert, Iowa. We were working with about an acre block of Golden Delicious apples, and they were on a vertical axis training system.
Sorry, going ahead.
Oh. Thank you. Would you like me to say next for the slide?
That'll help me, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in comparing the intelligent sprayer, as Dr. Gleason had talked about, versus the standard air blast sprayer, one of the things that we wanted to look at was our volume output per spray using the different sprayer types. So in this research, we had compared the standard air blast sprayer, which we had calibrated to 100 gallons per acre. And then we had used the intelligent sprayer, and the intelligent sprayer, we chose 2 different rates to compare to the standard air blast sprayer rate. Next. This slide is a bar graph that represents the spray volume savings that we saw using the intelligent sprayer at both of the rates we had chosen compared to that standard air blast sprayer. So on the vertical axis, you can see the percent of spray volume saved. And on the horizontal axis, you can see the years, so 2020 through 2022, and the volume saved per season. So the blue bars represent the spray volume saved using the intelligent sprayer compared to the standard air blast sprayer using a low flow rate, and the gray bars using a high flow rate with that intelligent sprayer. So you can see in 2020, we had started with 2 rates, and we saw a savings of about 30% using that low flow rate, and a savings of about 20% using that high flow rate in the intelligent sprayer compared to the standard sprayer. In 2021 and 2022, our group had decided to drop our rates to sort of see how low we could go compared to the standard sprayer, and we saw even greater savings. So with that low rate, between the 2 years, we saw about 50 to 60%, and with that high rate between the 2 years, between 40 to 50% savings. Next. So on average, the intelligent sprayer, using the intelligent sprayer, you can save approximately 30 to 60% per spray versus just using the standard air blast sprayer in your orchards. So why do we see this savings? Well, as Dr. Gleason had talked about, with the technology that the intelligent sprayer uses, it's much more accurate. And so it's really only going to put out or apply pesticides onto the canopy. So if you have large gaps in the canopy, or we had a derecho a few years ago, which is a very intense windstorm that took out many of our trees. So we actually have a lot of gaps in our orchards right now. Using that standard sprayer, it would be applying pesticides in those gaps. using the intelligence sprayer, those nozzles are actually going to turn off because there's no canopy to spray. Next. So what does this mean for larger acreages and tank mixes and having to go back and refill? Because using that intelligence sprayer, we're not applying pesticides in spaces where we don't need to apply them. We actually save and conserve on volume to be able to put pesticides out and to cover more area than we traditionally could with that standard air blast sprayer. Next. So what does this mean on a per spray basis? Well, the biggest thing is the time of the growing season. So earlier on, you don't have as much volume in your canopy, so there's less tissue for the intelligence sprayer to see and to spray. Later on, as the canopy develops and you see more volume, more density, there will be a lot more tissue to spray, so it's going to be putting more volume out. There are other more orchard specific factors. So I had said we're working with a vertical axis system. A lot of people now, I think, are, when they're putting in new orchards, they're looking at more of those tall spindle, high density plantings. The trees are a lot smaller in height for some of the rootstock that you're using. So there's not as much to spray height wise, and the canopy's a lot smaller than what you would see on maybe a semi-dwarfing rootstock in those vertical axis systems. Pruning is also big. So if some things have happened on your farm, you weren't able to maintenance as much as you would like, you weren't able to cut out some of the branches or deadwood that you had seen, there's more to spray there versus if you're keeping up with maintenance and you're pruning and you're really training that canopy to look like what you want it to look like and to be optimal for the apple tree's growth and development, there's less to spray. So there are also other factors to consider on an individual spray basis, as well as total volume over the entire growing season. Next. So the second thing we wanted to look at was spray coverage. So with the intelligence sprayer, we saw savings, but how does that compare to the coverage that we see using the standard air blast sprayer? And so the image above where it says water sensitive papers, this is how we collected the coverage data. Water sensitive papers are these yellow cards. So when they're exposed to an aqueous solution, they turn blue. And the other picture where you've got sort of this number system superimposed onto this yellow apple tree, this is where we had placed the cards in the trees when we had done these water sensitive paper tests. And this was just to get an idea as to the coverage that we saw comparing both sprayer types in many different locations of the tree. So further into the tree, close to the leader, further out on either sides at different heights, things like that. And we wanted to just get a general idea as to what kind of coverage we saw throughout the entire tree as opposed to specific locations. Next. So for the coverage dates, and like we had talked about, it really depends on where you're at in the season with how much that intelligence sprayer is putting out compared to that standard sprayer. We also wanted to get a good representation of canopy volume throughout the season. So we had taken coverage data at the very beginning of the season where it was about quarter-inch green, half-inch green, things like that. Then we had taken it a little bit later when the canopy volume filled out and increased. So around bloom, a little bit after bloom. And then our last date was pre-harvest when we saw full bloom and the apples had put on size. Next. So these cards represent the coverage that we saw using a low flow rate with the intelligence sprayer, a high flow rate with the intelligence sprayer, and then that 100 gallons per acre rate for our standard sprayer. And the position that we had chose to show in today's webinar series was the position 2. So that middle section on that central leader, we had just placed the card right on the trunk of the tree there. As you can see with the low flow rate and the intelligence sprayer, we see about a 3% coverage savings, or excuse me, spray coverage. Using the high rate, so that 0.09, we saw about a 25% spray coverage. And that's very comparable to the standard rate at that 100 gallons per acre. So using the high flow rate with the intelligent sprayer and the standard sprayer at 100 gallons per acre, we actually see similar spray coverage on those cards. And this is representative of actually all of the locations on the tree for the spray coverage cards that we had seen and the data that we had taken. And I also want to note that when we had done these tests, we weren't using any adjuvants or spreaders or anything like that, no pesticides. We were just using water. So the implications there are, if you're using a spreader, you could achieve more coverage than that 25%, but still putting on at that high rate. Next. So again, we see equivalent coverage. So we talked about spray volume savings. We saw similar coverage, but what about adequate pest and disease management at the end of the season? And I think on the next slide. In Iowa, over all 3 years at the end of the season, we had harvested apples, taken a look at incidents of sooty blotch and fly speck, which is one of the diseases, as well as fire blight in the orchards. And we saw equivalent control in each of our treatment plots with the intelligent sprayer compared to our standard sprayer. And it's also important to note that these were dry years as well. And then I think there's a note on the next slide about the Ohio, so I'll let Dr. Ivey take over for this one.
Okay, I didn't know I was taking over. No problem though. So we did both these studies in Iowa and Ohio, and we used orchards that were experimental or high density, but we also had demonstration trials at 2 different growers' locations in Ohio. And we evaluated disease, so any type of disease, whether it was a rot or scab. And then we also looked at pest injury. And we saw equivalent control in all 3 of the years, both within our experimental fields, but also within our demonstration trials. And so, in fact, one grower has started to or purchased last year this spray technology and is now using it based on the research that we've done here in Ohio and Iowa. So that's my input.
Melanie, I don't know if you want to comment on this because this is Ohio data. You could.
Okay, sure. Well, so then we were interested in how long it would take to pay back the intelligent sprayer, because it is an investment, and the cost of it varies depending on whether or not you buy a brand new sprayer, or if you have it retrofitted, whether or not you take the sprayer and get it retrofitted at the provider, or if you have to deliver it there and get it back. So the costs differ depending on the type of spray system that you end up purchasing. And you can see here that if you look at the very bottom where it's 1 acre, it will only take you around 112 years to pay off the sprayer, which obviously that's not feasible. But if you look up into the 20 to 50 acres, then you're getting down to 3.5 for a 20-acre farm, 3.5 years to pay it off, versus a 50-acre farm where it will only take about a year to pay it off. And we've considered the cost savings in fungicides, as well as the differences in the amount of time or labor to do the spray for this. And I think if you advance it, there's an average that we show on here. Yeah, so less than 2 years for a 50 plus acre orchard. And this is based on high density plantings.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. I'll just wrap it up here for the intelligent sprayer. Just to repeat what we've said, the intelligent sprayer in our trials saved 30 to 60% in spray volume with the same pest and disease control as you would get on the standard air blast. It is commercially available. It is expensive, but then the payback for larger orchards is fairly short. We are doing an economic analysis, as Melanie alluded to, and that bottom line on the economic analysis for both Iowa and Ohio data will be coming out very soon. We have a couple of really good economists working with us. So I think at this point we'll stop and ask for questions with regard to this intelligent sprayer field work. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into the second part, which is having to do more with warning systems?
Yeah, thank you guys for the first part. So you mentioned that it's commercially available. Like where would one just start even searching for an intelligent sprayer if they're interested?
Well, there's the company in, I think it's called Smart Apply these days, Smart Apply Incorporated. Is that right, Melanie? I think that's right. They're in Indianapolis. And they've been in some of the larger trade shows showing, but they're also working through a number of dealerships. I understood from Dr. Zhu that they're working through John Deere dealerships around the country, as well as several other larger equipment providers. They're not manufacturing it, but they're taking orders on it there, and then they're coming from Indianapolis.
Okay, very good. And we had a question from one of our attendees. In the Q&A, it says, I have a small orchard and this technology is too large for me. I use a backpack sprayer, but I do have an electrostatic sprayer used for applying titanium dioxide. Would that sprayer be able to attract the electromagnetic spray to the foliar canopy?
You want to handle this, Melanie, or? No, okay. Let me take a shot at it. You can correct me where I'm wrong. Electrostatic is a technology that spray engineers have been working with a number of years, and the idea is that the spray droplets released by the sprayer could have a charge that was opposite to the charge on leaves and foliage of the tree, and therefore there'd be an electrostatic attraction between the positive and negative, positive coming off the sprayer and the negative on the tree, and that would make for greater accuracy in the spray. I'm not getting around to answering your question because I think the answer would depend on the specific kind of equipment. What I'd ask is if you put your email address in the chat, we can do a little research for you. We need to ask you a little bit more detail about the sprayer model and see if we can come up with a better answer, because I think the answer may be specific to your equipment. We just need some more details.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead and put information in the chat, and we'll make sure to get that to you, Mark, so you can do that information. Any other questions over just the intelligent sprayer?
I put the link in the chat box to the company Smart Apply, and I also put a link to our website, which is based at Iowa, where you can find more resources on the intelligent sprayer and warning systems and the research we've done on this system.
There's a lot of good stuff on that website. Podcasts with a whole variety of people in the entire realm of spraying and Apple IPM and blogs and videos and so forth. Kind of makes it come alive. So it's probably worth your while to take a look at that.
Question, what is the recommended intelligent spray rate to use in Apple?
Okay, and that's a really good question. And just chime in here, Melanie, or Liv, if I'm misleading here, but I think the answer is it depends. It may depend on a number of factors, like some of the ones that Liv mentioned. And it may have to be customized to your orchard. We've been using and talked about spray rates like 0.06 and 0.09. Those are settings for the intelligent sprayer. But I think to get the most efficiency, this will probably have to be customized to the particular orchard. When Melanie was talking about high density orchard versus semi-dwarf or older orchards, the answer may be different. It may also be dependent on the extent to which the pruning has been done and so forth. You want to add anything, Melanie?
Yeah, I think, that when we think of sprayer rate with the intelligent sprayer, we're not talking about a volume per gallon, rather it's, the amount of, or the flow of the fungicide through the nozzles. And so that 0.06 to 0.09, within that range, you should get good coverage, targeted coverage, and good disease control. Those are the two rates that we've tested. And ideally, you would select one of those rates. You wouldn't want to go below it, and you could possibly go above it, but if by going above it, then you're losing out on your savings, because you're putting a higher flow rate, so more fungicide or insecticide that's going out. We have evaluated this in grapes, and we looked at 3 different rates in grapes, and we looked at across in the West as well as here in Ohio, and we determined, for grapes that the rate really does matter. And so we were able to figure out what the low rate would be to give adequate control versus being too low. So I definitely wouldn't recommend going below that 0.06, in order to achieve the disease control that you're looking for. Of course, if you have a really high disease pressure year, you might need to increase it, but staying within that range is recommended. And you also, with this system, we didn't talk about it, go into the details, but you will put in there the width of your rows, and so that you're making sure that the spray, distance is optimized. And so there's a lot of variables that, not a lot, but several that you input into the computer, and then it does all the work for you.
Okay, and I think kind of a follow-up, it says, regarding the Iowa spray cover data, does a 0.06 rate provide 3% coverage only all over the tree canopy?
Liv, you want to comment?
Sure. So yeah, that slide that had shown the pictures, that was pretty accurate as far as, with all the locations in the tree. It could vary between 3% and 10%, things like that at that rate. But I also want to emphasize too that we did see similar adequate pest and disease control at the end of the season using all of those rates. And we didn't use adjuvants or spreaders for that as well, which I know is common for a lot of growers to use to make sure that they're not only getting the pesticides on the plant, but they're getting the coverage that they want after applying. So that was just water that we had used in that. So no spreaders or adjuvants or anything like that. But yeah, I would say that 3% coverage, again, it varied between 3 and 10% using that rate in all of the locations on the tree that we had taken that data.
Just to add to that, Liv, Dr. Zhu, Huping Zhu, who developed the intelligent sprayer, has some very nice videos of what a droplet looks like with a spreader added to it. And it really covers a considerably larger area because it doesn't bead up as much as it would on a waxy coated leaf. Leaves have a naturally waxy coat. So it kind of breaks that surface tension and the drops spread out. But as Liv said, she was working with water, no pesticide, no spreader. So that would be a kind of a minimum result for what she got. That'd be a real stringent test. But the other thing is you can use spray cards to see what your pattern is looking like. They're not hard to use. Give yourself an idea in your particular orchard situation with your particular trees and et cetera. What does your spray pattern look like? In various parts of the tree.
in Ohio, we used our fungicide mix, so we didn't use just water, and our coverage was a bit higher. We were definitely within the 10 to 25%, and generally, I think it depends on who you talk to, but we have been working with Hairpin Zoo, and basically anything over 40 or 50% is excessive, and so you want to try and stay in the range that you're not just putting it off to runoff, because that's not necessary, and that's wasting product, and it's not as sustainable. So you will see an increased percentage when you use your adjuvants or your oils.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. And I know we have a whole nother part, so I don't want to take up too much time now. We'll definitely have time at the end for more questions and questions on the intelligent sprayer, but disease warning systems, I believe, is what's up next, Mark.
Yes. So this is also part of the same project in which we did the intelligent sprayer. We were looking at a couple of disease warning systems, both looking at them by themselves and also in combination with the intelligent sprayer technology to see how far we could take the pesticide reduction. So you may be familiar with warning systems. They're using weather data to predict disease risk, mostly weather data. You can measure it in your orchard, or you can use weather estimates from nearby weather stations. And in a minute, Melanie's going to talk about the NEWA system, which would be a little bit different than measuring it yourself by yourself. And the idea of the warning systems, and they're based on research, is that you spray a fungicide or a bactericide, whichever is appropriate, only when the disease risk is high. So if the system tells you have a high risk of an outbreak, then you're able to time your sprays more efficiently and perhaps save some sprays. So turning it over to Melanie now, and talking a little bit about these weather stations and weather networks.
Yeah, so as Mark mentioned, these warning systems rely heavily on weather data. They also, incorporate the pathogen biology and the crop type, but weather data is critical to the success of these models. And you can, collect using a weather station the data and input it by hand into the model, or you can use the software or these platforms that will take that weather data in real time for you, input it into the model, and then give you an output. And there are a few of these platforms available, and the one that we work with here at Ohio State is NEWA, which is the Network for Environmental, I always forget this, the Network for Environmental and Weather Applications, NEWA. And you can access this tool at newa.cornell.edu, so it's hosted there. And if you move on to the next slide, here in Ohio, we started using the system in 2016, and there's a yearly subscription fee for it. And that subscription fee varies depending on whether or not you get a state subscription, or individual growers can also get a subscription. So here in Ohio, my fruit pathology program, with support from the Fruit Marketing Growers Association and from the USDA and Hairpin Zoo, we pay for that subscription. So anybody in Ohio can access any of the weather stations that are connected to the system and utilize the IPM tools that are on it. This system supports two different types of weather stations, a rain-wise or an onset, which are both, the base price for them are both about the same. It will also support other weather stations, but you have to work with the NEWA coordinator to make sure that the data that's being collected from that weather station is compatible with their database and their software. And so in fact, here in Ohio at our outlying branches, our research stations, we converted our data, we worked with a software engineer who converted our data so that it was compatible. And we did that using the NEWA coordinator's help. And then once you have your weather station set up, and you can then request hardware onboarding, and you would do that through your state partner. So right now, Iowa does not have a subscription for the entire state, but as a grower, you could, get a weather station and set it up. And you have the option of making your weather stations public as well. So I don't think we have any producers in Ohio who haven't made theirs public. So if you're close by, you can make estimates and use their weather data to help you predict when you might want to spray, depending on the disease or the insect pest that you're looking at. We have, I think, 46 of weather stations now connected to NEWA in our state. And most of our large-scale apple producers are using NEWA in some form or another. If you want to advance the slide. Okay, so there are several tools, IPM tools available through NEWA, and of course, we're going to be focusing on diseases today. And there are 3 disease models there that you can access for forecasting. There's fire blight, sooty blotch and fly speck, and apple scab. There are also apple thinning and irrigation models that you can utilize. And then there are multiple insect pest models that you can utilize. Our growers here in Ohio use the fire blight model a lot, as well as the apple scab. And then they also take advantage of the apple carbohydrate thinning model. So they use this platform quite a bit. Next slide. So for the risk assessment model for fire blight, this focuses on a biofix state or time at first open blossoms. So if you just recall a little bit about fire blight, the primary infections occur during bloom, and the bacteria enter in through the flower and then infect systemically. So as soon as you have bloom, you have a risk for fire blight infections to occur. And so that is why that is the biofix. You can use cougar blight or Mary blight. And the Mary blight in this case has been modified somewhat to be used as an epiphytic infection potential, or EIP. And so in this image, you can see on the right-hand side are the risk levels based on the EIP value, and on the left side based on cougar blight. And the model for the EIP, which is what we recommend here in Ohio, it considers 4 different factors. So the bloom date, whether or not you have a history of fire blight in your orchard or in a nearby orchard, temperature for epiphytic growth, and then the blossom wetting period. And so it takes all this information and as well as your weather data, and it provides an output. And you can see the output here is color-based, which is really nice. It makes it very easy. You don't really have to pay attention to the numbers. You can just look at the colors. And then if you advance one, you can see then it provides you with recommendations. And, working together with your state extension specialists or with your crop consultants, you can, adjust your spray program accordingly. Here in Ohio, our primary bactericide that we use is streptomycin, although we do have streptomycin resistance in some of our orchards. And once we've identified resistance in an orchard, then we go ahead and make modifications to the recommendations using something such as kasugamycin. So this is very nice that it provides this information. based on your state too. There's a link, which I'm not showing, but you can click on Ohio, for instance, and then it will link you to resources from the Ohio specialist, which in this case is me. Okay, next slide. The second one is the sooty blotch and fly speck. And this model is based on research that was done in New York. And when Mark talks about the model, he'll be talking about the Iowa model, which we used for our research. But I wanted just to point out that NEWA uses the New York model. It's based in Cornell, so that makes sense. Their biofix is 90% petal drop. And in this case, they're focusing on leaf wetness duration, or your LWD, and predicted rain events. And it also, you input when your last fungicide application date is. And then once you have an accumulation of 175 wetting hours, that's predictive of an infection event and would warrant a spray application. And again, it's color coded here, as you can see. So there would be green, yellow, or red, so low, medium, or high risk. And if you advance, Mark, you can see here that it gives you recommendations for spraying, and they also provide recommendations based on 100 gallon per acre, or product per 100 gallon for the fungicides to use. So again, this would have a link, and it would link to Ohio or whichever state you were coordinating with to get your recommendations from that in terms of spray. So that's just a very quick overview of the two risk assessment models that we're focusing on for this project, which is fire blight and sooty blotch and fly speck. Next slide is you, Mark, I think.
Okay, as Melanie said, we tested sooty blotch and fly speck warning system, but it was an Iowa version, one we had developed in Iowa, and the Mary blight fire blight model that Melanie had mentioned. And this is Liv's data that I'm talking about here. So how does this work compared to the one Melanie talked about? It's in a sense, it's a little bit simpler, not better, just simpler. It starts when you put on the first fungicide, first cover fungicide spray, then you start counting up hours of relative humidity greater than 90% after that. And day by day, you add up those numbers. And when that total reaches 350 hours, it's time to spray again. Once you start spraying again, then you resume a regular calendar-based timing for sprays following that. So that delay is only done once during the growing season. And this is the paper, this mostly at all paper is the research that we use to develop that warning system in Iowa. We did have 3 dry years, as Liv said, and we had saved a lot of sprays for sooty blotch and fly speck, an average of 4 per year, which is exceptional. I think if you got back into a wetter cycle, that might be more like 2 or 3 sprays per year. But in a dry year, you can certainly save more. As far as the fire blight, the Mary blight fire blight warning system, Melanie already described the inputs and so forth. We were able in Liv's work to save 1 spray in 2021, 1 antibiotic spray in her plots. So not antibiotic, but fungicide. Sorry, not fungicide, but antibiotic. So just looking at this as a whole, the disease control on these sooty blotch and fly speck and fire blight were equivalent. We had about the same incidence. It was low, being a dry year, low incidence of both sooty blotch, fly speck, and fire blight, and equivalent to whether or not we used the warning system. So although we were able to save sprays, we did not sacrifice anything in terms of disease control. Just to wrap up this session, we talked initially first half hour about intelligent sprayer, and then later about warning systems. To try to fix these ideas, both of these things contribute to saving pesticide sprays. The intelligent sprayer technology saves volume has to go on a given acre of orchard because of the greater accuracy and less waste. So we're saving volume per trip, pesticide per trip, and all the other things, expenses that go along with spraying. Warning systems, disease warning systems, on the other hand, save trips. If we're not putting on an insecticide at that particular time, we don't have to make that spray trip at all. So we're saving all those costs associated with the trip itself. And the spraying, the pesticide savings here would be in the form of fungicides and antibiotics, depending on the warning system that you're looking at. So if we add up these two and we put these technologies together to see how they would do, the warning systems with the intelligent sprayer, and what we ended up with was less volume per spray trip, that's the intelligent sprayer, and fewer spray trips, that's the use of the warning systems. But we yet to repeat, we had an equivalent disease and pest control compared to standard air blast and using a calendar-based timing rather than a warning system timing. The result, we think we're completing our economic analysis here, but it looks like the IPM would be considerably more cost effective by combining this technology or using them alone, and considerably less environmental risk, because we're just putting on less pesticide and less wastefully. And comes the question, and this was related to a question that a listener asked, is how low can we go with reducing these pesticides? And when we combine the intelligent sprayer with warning systems, we're looking at two spray reduction technologies, one with volume per acre reduction, and the warning systems with saving an additional trips. So each of those times we're reducing our pesticide umbrella to protect the tree. And so the question, how low can you go, will partially be answered by the fine-tuning these technologies or these strategies to your own orchard. So variety, location, experience with the system, with the intelligent sprayer. One learns how to use it effectively, and likewise with the warning systems, the more you use it, the more efficient you get. So all these factors are going to go into how far that pesticide umbrella can shrink. Just as a wrap up here, this is our project team, and Melanie and I were the state leads, me in Iowa and she in Ohio. And there's our email addresses if you want to contact us for anything. Heping Ju is the engineer, the lead engineer behind the intelligent sprayer. He's at the USDA ARS Spray Lab in Worcester, Ohio. So he's actually a USDA employee with just a courtesy appointment to Ohio State. We have the economist Wendong Zhang and Nian Chung was his graduate student. They're both working together on the analysis of the economics on the project. Liv Meyer, that you've heard from in this webinar, and Bailey Miller was a former technician at Ohio State, and Jose Gonzalez was the overall project coordinator based at Iowa State. So with that, we can take any additional questions. They can be on the warning systems or intelligent sprayer or whatever else you have on your mind.
Yes, thank you guys so much. So please type in your questions into that Q&A at the bottom of the screen. One, I just kind of wanted to ask, like, between the intelligent sprayer and disease warning systems, like, if you're not using either one, like which one do you think you would start with first? Would you just start both at the same time? Which one might save you more in pesticide? Like, where would you start as a grower?
Well, it's a good question. And I think it's fair to say it depends. And there's a number of factors, and Melanie and Liv can chime in here. I think that the potential to save pesticides is probably greater with the intelligent sprayer, because you're saving a substantial percentage every time you put on that spray. The barrier for some growers will be the cost. That is, it's a substantial investment to go that way. But again, our economic analysis to this point shows that it is can be repaid, in a reasonable amount of time, but it depends on the orchard size. For a larger orchard, there'll be economies of scale with that larger orchard, and repayment will come more quickly. The other thing about warning systems is they're cheaper to get into, far cheaper to get into. One could buy weather gear and subscribe to NEWA. In the case of Ohio, it's free to subscribe. So you can get into that sooner. It will save spray trips, and that does save all the costs associated with that trip, including the gasoline, machinery depreciation, labor, etc. So again, you're saving trips with the warning systems, and you're saving volume with the intelligent sprayer. So which should you get in first? I think it's going to depend on the circumstances of your particular orchard enterprise, etc. Want to comment, Melanie or Liv?
I think that you said it beautifully. Ideally, I would love for people to, jump on board with the intelligent sprayer, just because of the so much savings and reduced drift and reduced environmental impact. And, we've done for several years on multiple crops now, and it's just really, really a great IPM tool. And I think for us in Ohio, the next step is to see if we can work with the state to, get some type of subsidy programs or, programs that will help support purchasing one based on, the environmental the benefits to the environment by using it. So.
I think, Melanie, if I'm correct, one of the federal programs has support for this, but I don't know whether it's directly applicable here or not.
Yeah, and it's not offered every year. I'm not sure, but some states have started to provide subsidies for the intelligent sprayer. The warning systems, they do take a bit of your time. You need to be checking the weather data. One thing I didn't say about NEWA is that it has a really nice app, which I think is part of the reason why a lot of our growers have jumped on board using it, because they can be out in the field and just go to the app and look and make decisions. But you do have to be checking it, every day, or at least every other day, and, be ready to respond as well. So it's not as convenient that way as just doing a calendar spray program, for instance.
That's a good point, the convenience factor.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that for both of these technologies, intelligent sprayer and warning systems, there is a learning curve to get good at them. And I think you could ascribe to that too, Liv, because you worked with an intelligent sprayer directly, and actually driving up and down the roads for 3 years. And would you agree there's you get better as you go and you understand it better?
Yeah, I was actually going to make a comment about that with adopting both systems. I don't think the learning curve is as steep, if you feel overwhelmed, if we've been talking about this, with the intelligent sprayer. Yeah, it's basically equivalent to getting a new application on your phone, like what NEWA has, and just kind of figuring out the ins and outs right away of the tech. And their customer service is also pretty good. We've had to call them a couple of times for things, but pretty manageable for the most part. So.
And low maintenance, even with all this technology, it's low maintenance. It only requires calibration once at the beginning, which is nice. Ideally, if you're using other sprayer technology, you should be calibrating every time, but we know that doesn't happen all the time. But with this one, it's a once and done per year.
The only thing that would add to that, that I think we mentioned in our grower manual that we have available now on our website is that there's it's like a little window, isn't it, Liv, that receives the laser reflections, and that has to be kept clean, and that's something you want to wipe clean before you go out to spray each time.
Yeah, and that's just as simple as using a cloth and a plastic cleaner. to get in there. So
Kind of like your backup camera. So the
Very
the
much like
new yeah
Yeah.
the NEWA data, like, is that pretty much nationwide? Can people kind of like download it now and start checking it out, or do you have to kind of wait till the growing season?
No, you can go to NEWA now, and if there's you can select any public weather station and look at that data. And it provides all the weather data as well as the models. But you would have to go, select a state on there and then go to that, select a weather station within that state in order to play with it. So if you want to play around with it, I would say go to Ohio, and we have 3 of them in Worcester. Click on one of them, they're all public and you can see, and it retains the data from the day you set up the weather station, so you onboard. And so I can go back, to 2016, for instance, which is kind of nice. You can go back and, look at historical data, and it presents it in a very nice way, in nice graphs. We're on NEWA 3.0 now, so it's much better to use than it was, 4 or 5 years ago. They really have put a lot of work into having a nice interface.
There's a question on the chat. Are there any risks of fungicide resistance development because of less amount of fungicide applied with the intelligent sprayer? That's a really good question. We haven't documented, well, we'd like to think that that's true. We haven't documented any increased risk. As long as you're at the effectiveness level, the minimum level at which the fungicide is effective and can retain its effectiveness between spray intervals, then you should not have additional or any additional risk of fungicide development by fungicide resistance. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of the spray savings, most of the spray savings here is because what was formerly drift, in other words, it missed the tree, is now hitting where you want it to go. So you could consider that drift to be essentially wasted, and there's very much less drift when you're in the intelligent spray mode. So
yeah, I'll add to that it's not actually reduced volume. The same amount of volume is going on to the canopy. It's that you have reduced waste. And so if you think about fungicide resistance and how it works, you possibly could be lowering your risk because you don't have that off-target drift, and off-target drift often is contributing to resistance development in off-target microorganisms. And then depending on, how resistance moves around, you have a reduction in horizontal movement. So in terms of fire blight, you have less off-target bacteria being hit by your antibiotic, for instance. We did look at it in grapes. So we sampled before and after for QOI or strobilurin resistance. We sampled before and after each spray throughout the season, and we saw no difference. In fact, we saw no resistance development using a standard fungicide program for grape.
and that's those are a group of fungicides that are highly at risk for fungicide development, the QOIs.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the key is having that good coverage, the kind of thing Liv was talking about. If you have the good coverage on your target, then you're well protected.
Excellent. Well, we're at about time, everyone. So thank you so much for all the excellent webinar. If you're attending, you will receive an email when the video is available, and please share that with anyone who wasn't here. Just to let you know, our next Pest in Progress webinar will be February 15th. That will be 12:30 p.m. Central, 1:30 Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about trapping and development of degree day models for Missouri berry crops. And we're going to have Clement Akata-Mensah from Lincoln University of Missouri and a couple of his collaborators talking about that. So hopefully we will see you all in a month. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.